Hi, this is Josh Kulp. We are doing the video for Daf Shevui, Masechet Avodah Zarah, Daf Samekh Vav, tracking Avodah Zarah, page 66. And we're beginning to get to that section of the Gemara that talks a lot about laws that are relevant today and the laws of kashrut, of keeping kosher. A lot of the laws of kashrut have to deal with mixtures. What happens if a prohibited substance gets mixed in with a permitted substance? Is the entire mixture prohibited? Or can the permitted substance nullify the prohibited substance? So classic case, a little bit of, let's say, pork, right? A little bit of like maybe lard falls into a big vat of meat, or some non-kosher meat falls into a big pot of kosher meat. Does the entire pot of kosher meat remain kosher? Does it all become prohibited? It's a complex subject. It comes up in Masechet Avodah Zarah and in Masechet Chulin as well. And the usual criteria in the Gemara is what's called notein tam. Does it impart a taste? So if you had, let's say, a little bit of pork that falls into a big vat of, let's say, porridge, if you could taste the pork in the porridge, then the entire vat of porridge would be prohibited. If you can't, then you could eat up the whole vat of porridge and it wouldn't be a problem. But the test of taste is problematic on a lot of accounts. One of them, which leads to why we don't use this test anymore, is the problem that how can you ever taste it? Who's going to taste it? You give it to a non-Jew, right? That was a solution in the Talmud, but it's not all that convenient. And that's why we have today, generally speaking, a notion, a halacha, of it's batel b'shishim. It's nullified in 1/60th. But there's other problems, namely if something has the same taste, and that's what comes up in our sugya on the beginning of the page. Let's say you have prohibited new wine, and it falls on some grapes. Okay, prohibited new wine, what we would call grape juice, tastes just like the grapes. And really, no matter how much of that new wine falls on the grapes, you'll never be able to taste it because it tastes exactly the same as the grapes. Another case that could come up, and does come up elsewhere, is chametz. Let's say chametz that after Pesach, when chametz that was there in possession of a Jew on Pesach is still prohibited, gets mixed in with permitted chametz that was created after Pesach. What do? They taste the same. But how do you know whether or not there's enough prohibited chametz to prohibit the permitted chametz? So that question comes up in our Gemara, but it comes up with an interesting twist. We have an interesting machloket between Abaye and Rava about the new wine that falls onto grapes. Abaye is the one who says that we prohibit, since they have the same taste, so even if the smallest amount falls onto the grapes are prohibited. And that's what's called bimashu. Because if you can't taste the difference between them, then you have to act more stringently. You'll never be able to taste the difference. So you have to act more stringently and say that even if a small amount of new prohibited wine falls on the grapes are prohibited. And Rava says, no, we follow the name. Grapes and new wine have the same taste, but they have a very different name. One we would call wine, and they didn't have a word for grape juice, but they would just call it wine. Halachically speaking, it has the same status. So they would call it wine, and the grapes are still called grapes. So wine falling on grapes is not what we would call two things of the same species, but those are two things of different species. Because when two things of the same species get mixed in together, we can't follow the taste because they taste the same. Now that's what we would call the difference between realism. Do you follow in realism, the new grapes, the grapes and the new wine are basically the same. They taste the same. So that's like a realistic way of viewing the halacha, and what's called often a nominalistic way. We following the names, the nomos. The name of something says that the new wine is something different, even though physically it tastes the same, because we call it something different. Now, interestingly enough, in the continuation of this daf, we see that things can work in another way. Things can have the same name and taste very different. You can have vinegar that's from grain, and you can have vinegar that's from wine. They're both called vinegar. So if you follow the name here, then you have two things of the same kind. And that's Rava's position, that we follow the name. It's a nominalist position. And Abaye's position is we follow realism, which is the taste is this, different. And so therefore, the nullification occurs only if the forbidden thing does not, if the forbidden thing doesn't impart taste. So he can be more lenient. So I just want you to get into thinking as we learn this daf, these two notions of nominalism and realism. Do mixtures become prohibited because there is the real taste of something? Or is it a nominalistic problem? The name of something forbidden entered there, and there's no real different taste of it, but the name of that prohibited substance is there. If you Google nominalism and realism in rabbinic law, you'll find a lot of interesting articles. I will try to maybe post a couple on the Facebook site. So good luck in learning, and Chag Samekh to everybody who will be celebrating the Chagim this week.